Welcome to today's What's New in Sigma webinar. Hi everyone, thanks for joining. We've got some fantastic features to go through today. But we'll just give everyone another minute or so to join the webinar before we get started. So please just hang tight and we will get started in just a few minutes. Thanks. All right, let's get started. John, if you could advance that slide, please. Welcome to What's New with Sigma. Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Hedrick, and I'm a Director of Product Marketing at Sigma, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar on What's New in Sigma. And today we have our fantastic Sigma expert, Senior Director of Solution Architecture and Evangelism, Jon Avrach, to take you through some really interesting new Sigma features and show you how they can add value to your work. And today we have some great new capabilities to share with you. But first, a few housekeeping items. So we are recording this webinar, and you will receive an email with a link to the replay after the webinar is finished if you want to replay it or share it with somebody. If you have questions, please go to the GoToWebinar questions panel and just type them in as we go. We'll pause throughout the presentation at some kind of ends of sections, and we'll answer some relevant questions at those points. And then at the very end, we'll have an additional Q&A section for other questions we get from the audience. Also, if you look in the GoToWebinar interface, you'll see a handouts panel. And in that handouts panel is a PDF with some links to some resources such as the documentation for you. And if you could advance the slide, please. Great. And we also have a giveaway. So for the live participants of our webinar today, we will select one winner. And then that winner will be announced at the end of this webinar, and we'll get to choose from one of the prizes shown on the screen. So before John goes into the new features, we have a couple of quick poll questions for you so that we can better understand who's participating and kind of adapt our talk track on the fly. So here's the first poll. What is your role using Sigma? And just pick the one that is closest to what your job role is, whether you're a BI administrator, analyst, manager, or both, or business user. Please go ahead and select quickly. I'll give you a few more seconds, and then we'll show the results and move on. All right, we have more than 70% now, so I will share the results. You should see that here. It looks like today we have a lot of people who both do BI administration as well as analysts or managers, and then just a few business users. Okay, great. So I will hide that. And one more quick poll, which is just to understand how long have you been using Sigma? Are you new to Sigma? Have you been using it a few months or almost a year or over a year? Pick the one that suits you best, and then we've got some responses here. Great. And the results so far, it looks like a majority of folks have been using the product between 3 to 12 months, so you got a sense for Sigma, although there are quite a few new folks as well. So we do these webinars both for new users of Sigma, prospective users of Sigma, as well as our longer-term users that are always interested in learning more about the new capabilities we've added. So with that, we will go on to the What's New in Sigma agenda, and I will hand it over to John to get started. It's all yours, John.
All right, thank you, Scott, and welcome everyone. My name is Jon Avrach. Welcome to the What's New in Sigma webinar for March. Starting off here on March 1st, we have a lot of topics to cover here today, and I see a lot of people on the attendees list that have been to many of these webinars before, so welcome back. And for those people that are new to this webinar, we do hold this on roughly about a monthly cadence, as Sigma is continuing to release lots of new features all the time. So today we have a packed agenda with lots of demonstrations. We're going to cover off on data lineage, visualization improvements, dynamic text elements. These are going to be like the main showcase for today. And then we have a whole bunch of other things like top-end filters and some performance optimizations. We've improved the way like page controls are being shown, and some small stuff like small paper cuts out there, like making copy and paste better, filling out the ability to do Google Sheets exports from different types of visualizations. Before we had it on just tables, now we also have it on pivot tables, and some other good stuff. So let's just jump right in here and start by talking about workbook lineage. And this feature is actually in beta right now, and you'll see a beta label on it. I'll give you a demonstration in a second. And the purpose of workbook lineage is to be able to give you a visual representation or like a map to show you how the workbook is constructed. So if you've spent a lot of time in workbooks, as you start creating more and more elements, what you notice is that it can become a little confusing to know like what's based on what. So everything in a workbook or most things in a workbook tend to have some kind of source, like a data source, and you can chain elements together. You can take a table and build a chart on that, and build a table on that and a chart on that, and you can kind of chain these things together as much as you want. And also with the introduction of lookups, which we covered in a previous webinar, that also creates more dependencies. You end up with lots of dependencies across pages and workbooks, and also within a page. So the lineage, what it does is it helps you see all these dependencies. And this is important because if you're trying to troubleshoot an issue or you want to make a change in the workbook, you may want to know what else is going to be impacted by it. So lineage kind of helps you get your head wrapped around all these different things. So let's take a look at this lineage here. So I have a workbook which has a fair number of elements on it. It's not the most complicated workbook in the world, but it does have several tables and different visualizations on there. This one's actually taken from one of our templates out of the box on period-over-period analysis. Now, to access the lineage feature, you do need to be in edit mode. And if you've been using Sigma for a while, one thing you will notice is that when you open up a workbook, we recently made some changes, so it no longer opens up in edit mode. Now it opens up in kind of a preview mode. So you will need to click on edit in the top right corner there. And once you do that, in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see the lineage button, and there's that beta tag that's next to it, just to let you know that this is still a work in progress, but the feature is actually works quite nicely right now. So I'm going to show you what we have right now, and then I'll talk a little bit about where this feature is going to be headed. So this, when you first open it up, you will see a visual map of the entire workbook. So this includes all the pages and all the elements that are in the workbook. Like for example, here is a workbook table. Down here is another workbook table. Both of these workbook tables, year-over-year data and week-over-week data, these are based on this core database table that's sitting over here on the left. This is a very common type of workbook layout that you'll see where everything in the workbook is rooted off of a common data element, which is definitely a best practice that I recommend doing. And in this case, they're both based off of a table in the database, but another best practice is you may want to base them off of a data set. And just looking at the structure here, I would say this structure looks very healthy. You have a nice set of dependencies where you have all these charts here on the right are dependent on just two different common workbook table elements, which are then dependent on one workbook table. So what are some of the things you can do with lineage today? Well, one thing is if the layout doesn't work quite the way you want it to, we do our best job to automatically lay out all these things you can move these around just to kind of see where the parent-child relationships are. Do note that if you move things around, it's not going to save it the next time you open it up. The layout will be automatically reset. And that is something that we're looking into changing to be able to save it, although there are some nuances with that because the workbook is constantly changing. So saving the layout may not always be may not always make sense. You'll notice that when you click on some of the elements, like a table element or a data set, over here on the right, we will show some more information, some like properties about which connection is coming from, where the schema and the database are, and then you could also open up the data set or the table directly from here. If you click on other elements here, it will highlight the parent-child relationship with the arrow there, and there's an option to view the element from here. One of the changes that we are looking into making is to really expand this with a lot more information. So similar to how we have some information with the table element, right now when you click on a chart, there isn't much information here. So one of the things, for example, we're going to do is make it more obvious about what the parent and the child are. You can visually see it now, but we'd also like to make some changes where it actually spells out this relationship a little more explicitly. So we are in the works of doing those things. But what you can do right now is if you see one of these charts, you can click View Element. So this one is percent change. And if I click on View Element, it's going to jump to that workbook page. And if you look closely, you'll see that percent change viz on the top has a blue box around it, indicating that we've jumped directly to that element from lineage. Another feature you can do over here is if you can always recenter it. So if you are zoomed in and you kind of lost where you are, you can click on this Fit View button, and over here in the top right, you can also select different pages. So by default, it'll show all pages, but we can click on these different tabs here. This one has no elements on there, and then you can see some of these have fewer elements on them. There's two ways to close it. I just kind of point this out because I got lost in here once. There is an X button in the top right, and you can also just click on the lineage to get out of it right there. So that is the lineage feature. And moving along, we have a number of visualization improvements we've made. So it's almost hard for me to keep track of these as well. One of the nice things about preparing these webinars is it gives me an opportunity to take a deeper look into to the properties panes of some of the visualizations. We're constantly adding little things here and there. So let's just go into what some of these are here. So these mainly apply to bar charts and line charts. There are some changes we also made to like pie charts and donut charts, which I'm not going to cover here today, but you can look in our release notes. So for the big changes for bar charts and line charts, which are the two most common charts that I've seen with our customers, is we've really improved the way we are showing data labels. So if you have labels turned on your chart, I'll show you an example of this in a minute. You may have noticed in the past that the labels would often overlap each other. Particularly, this happens a lot when, like if you have a bar chart with, let's say, a bar chart by state, 50 states being shown on there. Sometimes it can be a little too much data for the chart labels to look good. So we've put some nice enhancements in there to make sure that the labels are not going to overlap and create a giant mess in there. And then things like gaps, label strokes, line styles, best really shown by demonstration, but really the point of all this is just to make everything easy to read, to make the charts really pop, and to put a little more polish on there. The dashed lines in particular, and I have a few examples of this, do a really nice job at doing use cases that involve like projections or some kind of forecasting type models that you might do. So let's take a look at all these here. So first we'll go into the line chart options. So here I have a line chart, and I have two different series on here for profit and margin. And the blue line showing profit has been made thicker. So this is one of the adjustments you can make. And the orange line, we're showing data points, and we're also using dashes here. So if I pop over into edit mode, we can look at the actual properties over here, and then under line shape is where you'll find these different options. So here you'll see there's like a menu for like solid, dashed, or dotted, and you can also change the thickness over here, and you can change how you want to show null values. I don't have an example right here of null values, but the point here is that sometimes, especially with time series data, you will have missing points in the series where there's just no value in there. It's just very typical in time series data. So you can choose if you want the chart to kind of interpolate the results, or if you want to completely hide it, or if you want to treat it as zero. So you don't need to do any kind of workarounds in your data. You can just set the chart option there. And then you can also choose where you want to apply this to. So if you want to make a wholesale change and make all the line thicknesses thicker, you can just say apply to all series, or you can individually choose one of these. Say sum of profit is going to be solid and 4 pixels, whatever here, or that the margin is going to be dashed and 2 pixels. So those are some of the line shape options that we have there. Scrolling down here for bar charts, we have gap control. And this is really I was very happy to find this feature. I never realized how bad it was until, or how crowded some of the charts could be until we actually put this feature in. So I have kind of a before and after view here. So this chart here with that I'm highlighted over called default gaps, this is how it looks out of the box. And it is definitely readable, but what was interesting is when you start playing with the gaps between the bars, you can end up with something on the right, this custom gaps, where really I think it does a nice job at separating off the different categories. It just makes it easier on the reader to be able to consume the data. And the way you control this, and this is available for bar charts, is there's a gaps menu here. So there's gap width, and there's gaps between sets. So I'll show you what these two things do here. So looking at the chart on the right, the custom gaps, by default, we will we'll choose auto. So that's what auto looks like. And if I choose small, we're kind of watching this chart on the right, you'll see the gap width between these two, between the blue and the orange is going to change here. And it'll become more obvious as I move up here to medium and then finally to large. So for this one, I like to use small, and then we can also control the gaps between each of the sets here. So between arts, entertainment, and computers, you see right here we have a small white gap where I'm moving my mouse, and on the right it's larger, so we can kind of play with this gap a little bit and then choose exactly what we want. So a lot of our customers, they want to have really nice presentable dashboards, particularly true on embedded use cases, and now you have more control over that with the gap control. So the next one, we go on to labels. So there's a few things we have with labels. There's overlapping concept, and then there's also this concept of stroke. And you may say, well, what is this stroke thing all about? So let me put this back into preview mode here. And I have these two bar charts, and they look identical right now. But the difference is there's an option for this stroke. And on the top one, it's off, and on the bottom one, it's on auto mode. So the one on the top, which is off, is really the previous behavior that we had before this feature was released. You can still have that behavior available, or you can use the new behavior, which is automatically turned on. And the best way to see this is as I shrink the screen here, you are going to eventually see once the bar width is such that the label can no longer fit inside of it, you'll see a difference in the way it's displayed. And there we go. You can see it's kicking in. Actually, it's a really good stopping point. And I'll zoom in here a little bit. So the previous behavior that we have on top is we would keep the label in the same color. And you can see it's starting to get cut off there in the edge. It'll become a little more obvious if I shrink this down. And now you can really see that the value right here, like the .30, you can't see it at all. Whereas in the bottom, with stroke turned on, this is actually in auto mode. So in auto mode, Sigma knows that, hey, this label can't fit inside the bar chart. It has to automatically turn the stroke on. So this just happens by default now. And if we increase the width a little bit, you'll see there'll be some states, if we get to just the right point here, there we go, where the stroke will be on and the stroke will be off. And this is what the auto mode does. And if you say, well, I don't like that, we do this for readability, but you may not want it. You may want it to be, you may want to have a little more explicit control over that. And that's fine too. And what you can do here is go into the properties and then look at data labels, and you'll see the show stroke option here. So right now it's in auto, and if we put it to on, what this means is the strokes will always be showing. So if I make this really wide here, you'll see that the strokes are still showing. But then if I put this back to auto, you're going to see these labels here will go to white with no strokes. So those are the different ways you can control the strokes. So I think it's a nice little addition to make things more readable in the charts. And this next one was a really popular request. This has to do with the label overlapping. So again, we'd have a before and after, or actually the before one's on the bottom. So this is the behavior that it was before. And you can still get this behavior if you want. And what's happening here is the labels are overlapping. So if you look at Alabama and Arizona, these numbers are on top of each other and they're really very hard to read unless you tooltip over it. And on the top, using this auto mode of overlapping, we do some computation to basically figure out that this label, if we show Alabama and Arizona, they're going to overlap. So we just don't show Alabama in this case. You can still get the value with a tooltip, but by default, they will not overlap each other. So the way this is set is on data labels. Once you turn data labels on, you then have the ability to say, do I want to show them automatically, which is the default. And I recommend just using auto, or you can explicitly turn them to all. And what's really nice about this is that even if you increase the font size quite a bit, it's a bit ridiculous, but you get the idea that it still maintains the auto nature of it here. So if you were to put this to all, you would see it's just a garbled mess at this point. So with all these different options of the overlapping and the strokes and the widths up here, you really are starting to get the bar charts, which I think is the most common chart type out there, to really be a very slick looking type of visualization there. Let's just make sure we covered these all off: the overlapping, the gaps, the labels, and the line styles. Yep, we are good to go. Here's an example I took from one of the demos we did, which shows the forecasting with the dashed line. This one also shows the high-low range feature we put on the line charts a couple months back. And I think I have another demo of this line one as well. Yep, over here in there we go. So this is an example of one of our upcoming templates, which we'll cover on a future webinar around Snowflake contract compute burndown, which is a really nice template we're coming out with pretty soon. And this also shows a really good example of the projections. So what this template will show you in this line chart right here is the remaining balance you have. If you're a Snowflake customer, this will show you the remaining balance you have on your contract across all of your different accounts. That's what the solid line is right here. And then what we do is we do some projections off into the future. So you can see the date right there at March 1st. The line goes from solid to dashed, and we have two different projections here, one for based on the 7-day moving average and one based on the 30-day moving average. So this shows if you continue at the same rates, either the 7-day rate or the 30-day rate, where your credit burn will end up relative to your contract far off in the future. So really nice use of showing the dashed and the dotted lines there for projections. And this will be coming available to you soon in template form. So kind of going back to what I was saying before, we are coming out with a lot of these features. It's even hard for me to keep up with these, even though I'm using the product on many hours a day. So how do you keep up with all these features? This webinar, of course, is one way to do it, but we don't cover every single feature on here, and also we come out with these pretty often. So I would just reiterate, if you haven't checked it out, in the lower right-hand corner, there's the question mark for the in-app help. In addition to having the live chat, which is a great perk of being a Sigma customer, there's also the what's new box on here, and this takes you right to the release notes, and you'll see the release notes coming out, maybe every week, maybe every 2 weeks, and all these features will be listed in there. So it's really it's a little bit of time, but if you are a frequent Sigma user, it is one of the best ways to know about things that we have either fixed bugs or small little things that have come out which you may have been waiting for, like that dashed line in the line charts. Okay, so let's move on to.
So John, there are a couple of questions,
Oh
if you
yeah,
don't mind.
sorry, Scott, I didn't forgot to pause here. Yes, what do we
Oh,
got?
no problem. I mean, those visualizations are so cool. I personally can't wait to see the new Snowflake workbook templates when they're done. But the question that came in actually was from the lineage section. And the question was, can this data lineage be used across multiple workbooks?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it cannot be used across multiple workbooks yet. But that said, one of the features that we are looking at building right now is this idea of workbook references. So right now, workbooks cannot reference other workbooks, but that's something that we're looking at building right now, and that's part of a larger project around kind of revamping our data set concept. And for those customers that have been around for a while, remember the worksheets and dashboard era, in an effort to kind of sunset that functionality. One of the features we're going to be building is this idea of workbooks referencing other workbooks. So you'll be able to kind of reuse components across workbooks. And once that happens, then I would expect the lineage to be able to show you the workbook to workbook dependencies.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so let's go on to this. We've showed a lot of exciting things so far, but this one is dynamic text elements is a feature that has really blown me away. I knew it would be useful, but the way I've seen people use it, and I'll show you an example of it, has really kind of showed me something that's possible I didn't think we could do before. It's kind of opened up my eyes here. So what is this feature? It's on the surface, it's pretty simple. It's the idea is that you can put text in your workbook, and now you have the ability to put a formula embedded inside that text. So you could actually create stories by doing this. You'll see a little screenshot preview on the right, and I'll show you a live example of this in a second. So you can have some static text in there, and then you can mix it in with some dynamic calculations. And these calculations are built with the same formulas you're used to using inside of tables and charts. And it's the same kind of query model. So it'll all be live queried. So on the surface, that is the feature. And what's incredible is about what you can do with this. So you can create these data stories, and you can highlight insights, and you can just make your dashboards and your workbooks more understandable. You can kind of summarize the pertinent information. And really, I think what's going to happen if we start using this is you'll see that the visualizations they're kind of I'm starting to use that more as like supporting evidence and calling out the actual insight in the text element. So telling the reader of the workbook, hey, this is the insight that you should glean from this, and here's the supporting evidence to see it in the full context. So let's take a look at what this is. I'm going to go back to this Snowflake contract template because we're using a lot of our new functionality in our own templates, kind of dog fooding this here. So let's take a look at this. So here we have some dynamic text elements. You see it says, as of yesterday, 4.48% of the contract has been used in 7.96% of the contract's duration. So we're computing on the fly that the contract is nearly 8% done, but we haven't used 8% of the contract. We've used a little bit less than that. So we're kind of they're pretty close, but if we kept going at the same rate, we probably would have a little bit of spare credits at the end of our contract period there. So we're dynamically computing both these values. And then if the usage continues at a 7-day average of 1424 per day, and again, this is dynamically calculated, the contract will not burn out before the contract ends. And even this will not right here is a dynamic expression. So it'll either say will or will not based on what's actually happening with the contract values. I'll show you in a second how that's built. Here's another example. There are a total of 5 active Snowflake accounts. Again, this 5 is being dynamically computed, operating over 37 warehouses. Collectively, these warehouses used 17,000 credits last month, and a change from the previous month. And then here we use it again, Sigma Computing. This is one of the names of the orgs, is the top consuming account with 77,000 credits used. And then this is the warehouse using the most. So what's happening here is this is kind of what I was alluding to a minute ago, whereas this top 10 accounts by credit use is showing the supporting evidence, the chart here. And up top, we are using the dynamic text element to call out the top element up here. So it's not providing new information per se, but it's really drawing the user's attention so that they don't have to really guess what the insight is here. And then they can use the chart to kind of see it in the context. And likewise, on the right, we have, it says top 10 credits, top 10 warehouses, but it's actually showing more than that here. But you can see the sample warehouse production is the one that's being called out, which is the top element right over here. So let's take a look at how this is built. Oh, another thing I should point out is when you refresh these, there we go. Whoops, I changed 2 things at once there. Let me see if I can get that to happen again. It may be cached, but you may have noticed that the text elements, they briefly turned into bubbles. Okay, I can't get it to happen again, but these briefly turn into bubbles, which you may see, and that happens while we're loading the information, while we're running the query. So just like any visualization element on the page, all these numbers turn into queries in the back end. So if you were to go into the query history, you'll see like here's the dynamic text right here. One thing to note, actually we're gonna cover this in FAQ, but I'll just show it right here since we're here, is you don't see a whole bunch of dynamic text queries happening here. So even though we have 5 or so dynamic text elements on the screen, you only see one query. And if you were to closely examine this, what you'll see is that it's combining all of the dynamic text formulas into a single query. So this is an optimization that we automatically make. So instead of seeing, add number or like let's say 5 different dynamic text queries, you'll see far fewer than that. It depends on the formulas that you're doing. We can't always combine them into a single query, but if we can, like in this case, we can. It's far more efficient to go to the database once than to go to it multiple times. So it's a nice little optimization that's in there. So how are these things built? So if you were to edit the text cell, so this is just regular text, and then where it's highlighted, you can see there's a formula here. In this case, the formula is just a column name. So what's happened here is this element has already done all the computation ahead of time, and we're just pulling the value directly into the text element. So that's certainly one way you can do it. Compute the element in its own table or whatever it is, and then just pull it into here. But you can also put in whatever formula you want. This is just full-blown formula. So here with the will or will not, we have a condition, and we check the remaining balance. And if it's greater than a certain threshold, then we say will. Otherwise, we say will not. So nice little example of some simple but compelling dynamic English there. Going over to this one here, we're pulling out other numbers. And then for the sigma computing, this is a really common pattern. So we're using kind of like an if then else statement here to basically say, if this, we kind of go through all the different names here and say if the warehouse name is or if the account name is equal to the max one, then show it. So that's how we get the top performing one there. So the way you would create a new formula in a dynamic text element is you kind of have two choices. So while you're typing in the box here, typing in regular text, there is a formula button up here, which you can click, but you also see that equals is a shortcut for this. And we chose equals because it's very spreadsheet-like. So if you just say equal sign, which is what I just pressed there, and you can now type in your expression here. And it's going to show you all suggestions from all the available elements. So this is an interesting suggestion bar because we are showing you all the different elements that are in the workbook. So the search feature is a really important way to narrow down the column that you want here. So you can just build your formula in there, and then once you do it, it just becomes a dynamic part of the text. Okay. So we kind of covered this, but just to kind of reiterate, if we have a lot of these dynamic text elements, like let's say we have one text box with 5 different formulas in there, is this going to hurt my performance? So we are going to automatically combine these queries if it's possible. So one example is if you were to have a formula, if you had one text element which had sum of amount and average of amount in the same text box, these two would be automatically combined into a single query. So this just happens automatically. No need to do anything about it. And the big question is, can you use this feature today? You may be going into your Sigma right now in a different window and trying to hit the equal sign, and you're kind of disappointed because you're not seeing it there yet. So what I just showed you is in our staging environment. It is in late beta. This will be coming out in March. I know March just started, but it will be coming out in March. So hang tight. This is right around the corner. We're just doing some final testing on it. But as you can see from the demo, it's quite polished. It's actually in the upcoming templates. So this is very much a feature that's coming soon. Scott, before I continue, any questions on dynamic text elements?
Yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, this is great. And we've gotten some really positive feedback from folks that are saying, yay, I've been waiting for this to come into Sigma workbooks, and they're happy. But there is also a question about, can you use dynamic text as an alert? For example, you only want to show it when something is extremely important, like revenue exceeding a minimum threshold.
Wow, that's a great question. And so I think what the question is asking is if it exceeds a certain threshold, then show it. So we can do alerts today through our scheduling. If you do like the scheduled workbooks, you can have conditions in there, and that's more for like emailing or for sending out Slack messages based on a certain condition being true. You certainly could put an if then else statement into the text element to print out a value if a certain value is true. But what we cannot do is we cannot conditionally show the value if a certain value is exceeded. So that's not quite there yet, but I think that's a suggestion that's worthwhile to take back to our product team.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
good
even
question.
dynamic colors depending on the value.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so another quick question came in is, how do I use the actual equal in a text box?
Yeah, that was one of my questions too when I first saw this, and I actually don't remember how to do it. I'll try to riff here on the fly. I can't remember if it's going to be a. Now I don't remember. I know this is possible, but this is something that we need to make more obvious. I think that's the answer here because I'm not able to figure out here on the fly. Um, okay, I just got it, but that was incredibly painful. So it is possible, but I think that let me take this item back to our product team, and this is part of this, the final polish that I think we need to put on this feature. Is it probably needs some kind of treatment that when you press equals, there's some kind of indicator right here that tells you like, hey, if you just want an equal sign, then do this. So I think that's an enhancement that we need to make. I'll take a note of that one.
Okay, great. I think you can continue on with the agenda.
Yeah, great. Those are great questions. Okay, so let's move on to top end filters in workbooks. So if you were a customer from the worksheet and dashboard era, you remember that we had top end filters built in to dashboards, but we haven't had them in workbooks up until very recently. And we were able to work around this by using like ranking functions and regular filters, but it's a bit tedious and also not as flexible as this new feature that we built in here. So what we've done in workbooks is taken all the goodness from the original top end filter, put it in the workbooks, and we made it better in the process. So a lot of these parity features that we're porting over from our old product, we're improving on them at the same time. So now we have native top end filters. You can see from the screenshots, you can do top end, bottom end, top percentile, bottom percentile, and you can put this as a page control, and these features will just automatically appear there. You can also control the ranking function, a little more advanced, but if you want to do rank or rank dense or row number, rank dense is good for when you have ties in the data. If you have multiple values that are the same value, rank dense can be useful to show there. So what are the benefits? It's just easier than it was previously, kind of goes back to parity in some sense, and it's just easier to find the top and bottom values here. So let's show you what this looks like in action. So I've got a sample page right here, and here we have profit by product name, but there are a lot of different product names here. So if we want to do this as a filter, and we don't have to be in edit mode, we could be in the publish mode here too. Oops, actually that is, yeah, we can do this in publish mode if we're in the preview mode. Let me go into edit mode just because I want to convert this to a page control in a minute here. So we're gonna go over to the measure over here, sum of profit, and we're gonna add a filter to this. The filter by default will appear up here. It's gonna show you like min and max, but then if you click on the three vertical dots, you can now change the filter type. So here's the new option we added for top end. I'll change this to a top end. This filter right now is applying just to this one chart, unless I convert it to a page control, which I'll do in a minute here. And then we have all the options for top end and bottom end and percentile. When you do top 10 percentile, you will likely see, you may see more than 10 values depending on the size of your data set. So there's a top end, which we put on there. And now, let's go back into preview. We're showing top 10 product names. And if I were to drill down on this by, let's say, store name, the top 10 is also maintained. So that's a nice feature there because the top end is, it's on the measure. In this case, the sum of profit that you see on the y-axis. So it'll still keep showing you the top 10, which I think that's a really nice feature there. And then let's undo that drill down. And then what we could also do is you can convert this into a page control. It behaves very similarly. So now if you were deploying this as like in a workbook or an embedded workbook, your users can do top 10 or top N, but they can also change the different setting here on the fly. And there's no more work you have to do to make this happen. So that's how I created a top end control. There is another way to create a top end control. If you click on add a new element, you'll see down here at the bottom, there's a new control type for top end. So there's two ways to get to the same end point. You can click it here and just add a control directly to the workbook, and then you could wire it in here on the left-hand side. My preferred workflow is what I showed you before. Is I like to put the top end, or I like to put filters directly on the chart and then promote them to a page control using the menu over here. Any questions on the top end, Scott?
I think you can continue on with the
Yeah,
agenda.
great. So this next feature is one of many performance enhancements which we put in the product recently. I'm not going to cover all of them. We have made a lot of improvements to how the caching works. We're always kind of fine tuning. We have different kinds of caching. Like we have client-side caching we do. We also leverage different types of database cache out there. And this latest performance feature is just-in-time, also known as lazy loading. And the idea here is to only run queries that are visible on screen as you're scrolling through a workbook. And this will become particularly noticeable if you have really tall workbooks. So if you have lots of page elements and you have to scroll down to see them, you're going to see a change in behavior. It may be subtle. I think it feels really natural. And what happens is as you scroll down, you will see, just as the visualization is coming into view, you'll see the query will then be fired off. You'll see that blue bar moving across the screen. So on the right-hand side, I have an example of that with a few visualizations that are already loaded. And as I'm scrolling down, this new one loads. And there's two examples here on the right. They both have the blue bar going across them. But in the bottom example, you can see there's a preview of the data. You may wonder how it's possible that we have if we have the data, why are we still loading it? So what's happening here is the bottom screenshot is an example of the old results. And when I say old, it may be up to 24 hours old, let's say, or it may be in the browser's cache, it may just be a few minutes old. However it happened to be, we had the previous answer available in some cache, either client side or server side, and we'll show that answer, but we also know that it's not the latest answer. So we're going to load the latest one, but show you something instead of nothing while you're waiting for that to load. So all this happens automatically behind the scenes. And there's a lot of benefits to this. So whenever you can reduce the number of queries to the warehouse, good things happen. There could be cost savings on this, but even more important than cost savings is you're going to have a much better end user experience. So you're going to reduce the amount of queuing on the back end. For those not familiar with queuing, what happens is on any database system, whether it's Redshift or Snowflake or BigQuery, any database that I've ever touched has some queuing mechanism. Basically, it says if there are lots of people trying to execute a query all at the same time, the database can only handle so many at once. And usually that number is somewhere between 3 and 5 actual concurrent queries. Even if you have 500 concurrent users, only 3 to 5 of them are executing at any single time. And then the rest of them get queued up and they will execute. They might execute a second later or 2 seconds later, but they will get queued to some extent. So what happens is if you have a workbook with 500 visualizations on it and you have to scroll to get to 450 of those visualizations, we're not going to load the rest of those when you first open the workbook. We'll open them on demand. So in some of our customers, this has drastically reduced the back-end load. It means that when you open the workbook, the results will show up much faster than before, and it will also alleviate the load on the back end. If you're a Snowflake customer, you may be using auto scaling, which is the idea of spawning up more clusters or warehouses on the fly, and that's usually used for concurrency needs, for horizontal scaling needs. You are less likely to have auto scaling kick in because of this feature. And this is very much dependent on how your workbooks are designed and what your end user workload looks like. But it could be particularly impactful during peak hours, like Monday morning at 9 a.m. Everyone's getting on the system there. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to demo this one. This one is a bit interesting to demo just because if things are already cached, you won't see it. But I believe my cache should be not too fresh since I haven't opened this workbook yet today. So I'm going to click over on this year over year tab. We're going to see some visualizations load. That's normal. So these are in the view. And now watch closely because we're only going to see this once. I'm going to scroll down, and as I scroll down, we should see the new visualizations loading. You'll see those blue bars going across. There we go. That was a good example showing the previous cache version while loading the new version. Likewise, showed the previous cache version, loading the new one. There it is. You can see it's very clever. As I scroll down, the second it has the opportunity to run that query, it'll do it. It'll show the cache versions and run the new one at the same time. There's an example. Great. We just saw an example there at the bottom of one where the data was not yet available from the cache, and it was able to run the new query right there on the fly. So that's a nice example of the caching feature of a lazy loading happening on the fly. And that just happens automatically. So nothing you need to do. This is one of the beauties of Sigma as a cloud-based product. We just add these features, and they're immediately available for everyone to take advantage of. Scott, was there anything on the lazy loading that came in? Any
There's
questions?
one. Where is the cache data you mentioned stored when not in the browser cache?
Yeah, so just to be clear, we do not cache, Sigma does not cache data on the Sigma service. So that's a forbidden thing in architecture. We will never do that. We have a variety of caches. Some of them are client side, like in the actual browser cache. And we also take advantage of database cache. There are different types of database cache depending on which database you're using. So if you're using Snowflake, they have a thing called like results cache, where it'll store results for up to 24 hours, and we store query IDs for those, and we can pull on those. All databases, including Snowflake, Redshift, BigQuery, Postgres, they all have like regular results and buffer cache, which we take advantage of automatically. So there are different kinds of caches that are out there, and perhaps we need to do like a more in-depth webinar in the future. Just an idea. People are interested, let us know in the chat, where we go more to have more of like a performance-oriented discussion and go into depth what those different caches are. Because it is quite fascinating what's actually behind the scenes to deliver results faster. In the interest of time, I'm going to kind of pick it up a little bit here. We have a grab bag of items here, page control options, copy paste, and sheets exports. This stuff is best shown by demonstration. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to go into my other workbook here. And we'll go over to page controls. So page controls, also known as just filters here, now have a bunch of new options. So here I have a store region filter, and this is the behavior that we have by default. You'll see there's a search box here. There's null value here. There's also histograms. All of these are now controllable. So probably the number one thing people have said is sometimes they don't want to see the histogram. They like the histogram, but not always. In this case, maybe we don't really need it because there's 4 values there. So you can turn it off. There we go. I know one question that's going to come in is, can I control the sort order of these values? Unfortunately, not yet. This is a feature request we have in our system to be able to do custom sorting. Right now, the sort order will continue to be in histogram order, but you can hide the histogram at least. Search box. So at the very top of here, you can see on the left is a search box. Search box is useful if you have a lot of values in your drop down. Sometimes you don't. In this case, we just have region. So the search box doesn't really make much sense when you just have 5 known values here. So we can turn that off. And then also this null value here, we used to always show a null value filter. Null is kind of a special thing in data. will show it there regardless if it's present in the data or not. But you may know your data really well. And in the case of regions, everything has a region. So you just don't want to see the null values. You can get rid of that. So you can really make the drop-down list look quite a bit different with these options. So the way you configure these is you would click on the control, and then over on the left hand, these are just check boxes. You can turn these things on and off. Moving on to Google Sheets. So the most recent feature here is we added Google Sheet exports to pivot tables. We had them on tables, I think, going back a couple months ago, but now on pivot tables, you can now download these to Google Sheets. If you haven't used Google Sheets download option before the very first time, it will prompt you to link this to your Google Sheets account. Mine's already been done. And there we have the Google Sheets export of pivot tables. And this likewise works for tables as well. Do keep in mind that the same limits for download apply here, which is 150,000 row down limit currently, soon to be 1 million rows when that feature goes into general availability. And then we've also really improved the way we do multi-cell behavior here. So I can take the SKU number here. I'm going to click on 1 right here. I can shift click to highlight 3 values. Right click, I can copy these values. I can say keep only these 3 values. You'll see it creates a filter up here. To undo this. And then I can also highlight individual values. And right now I'm on a Mac, so I'm holding down the Command key. If you're on Windows, you'd hold down the Control key. And then you could say, let's just keep only these 5 values. And trying to see, oh yeah, the filter did apply. It's just a little, wasn't so obvious, but the filter actually did apply. It's either 409 rows there, and then if I repeat, it went down to 63 rows. So we did indeed apply the filter. And the last thing in the grab bag here, I'm not gonna really demo this per se, I'll just kind of talk through it, is if you do a bunch of filtering or you make some modifications, whatever it is, on a table or a chart, an element, and you go up to this and you set now feature. And set now, what it'll do is you can email out this, what you see on the screen to yourself. And this now works in draft mode. So previously it would only send the published version out. But if you have some changes you just made and you're just doing some ad hoc analysis, and you want to get a download of that to your email, you can do send now and it will send the draft version of that. And the last one is real quick. We now support, if you're using Postgres, we now support CSV uploads. And this was a really big request by all of our Postgres customers. There's not much more to say on this feature. So with that, Scott, I'm gonna hand it over to you for the wrap up.
Thanks, John. Yeah, that's great. Great features. So if the folks here want some more information, I think John gave you a few pointers. You can also go to our help desk and documentation. And if you look in the GoToWebinar, you'll see that PDF with links to documentation covering a lot of these new features. And here it is. You'll see this is also in that attached documents. So since it'll have the actual live links in that PDF. So that's probably a good place to look. But it goes through all the features John covered. We don't have really much time for a Q&A. I have one quick question and then we'll wrap up. So John, will all of these new capabilities work in Sigma and embedded situations?
Let me just think through all the features here. Actually, I'll just go back to the list right here. I would say tab and page controls, all of them except data lineage. So data lineage is not available in embedded, but the rest of them are.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. And then if you could take me back to go forward a few slides. Okay, and this one here. So please do, if you haven't already, if you're not already a customer, you can try Sigma for free, or you can share it with other folks that you want to have take a look at Sigma. We're going to do another one of these What's New in Sigma webinars on April 12th. And this one, we're going to focus on some of our new embedded capabilities. So moving beyond static embeds. And that'll be on Tuesday, April 12th at 10 a.m. Pacific. We also do our virtual hands-on labs every month, and the next one will be on Tuesday, March 29th at 10 a.m. Pacific. And if you have questions, just reach out to us for support. And we do have a winner, I believe. Could you advance the slide? And the winner is Harris Goddell. So you'll be getting contacted, and you'll get a choice of what you'd like from these prizes. And with that, I think that's everything for today. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed this webinar. Have a
Thanks,
great
everyone.
day. Thank you.